In episode 3, Sykes and Peggy end up going to one of Peggy's client's house and kind of forcing their way in, to the surprise of the client's wife, who had no idea he even lived this lifestyle. They're going to lay low there, hunker down, and plan for their next move. Now, over with Pennyworth, he finally goes to visit Esme's father. He asks for Esme's hand in marriage, which she's already agreed to, but Esme's dad isn't keen on the idea of a butler's son marrying his daughter. Not only does he tell him no, but he tells him that Esme's only with him because she likes the fact that he killed people. Because ever since an early age, she's had a fascination with the darker things in life. And he says, if she loves you, she loves the animal in you. The cherry on top is when he says that he will disinherit Esme if she marries him. Alfred's pretty dejected, and he heads back to the club where he meets up with Esme, and he tells her everything that her father said. Esme, however, doesn't care about her inheritance, but Alfred tells her, you should care. That's your future. And she says, no, you're my future. Through the conversation, it's pretty clear Esme doesn't care what her father thinks, and Pennyworth certainly does. This results in a pretty big fight where Esme gives back the ring and storms out. Alfred doesn't really want to hang out in the club that he works at, so he goes to that bar that's now free of any trouble thanks to Pennyworth's security. And as he's sitting at the bar, a woman named Martha Kane shows up. She had heard about the security firm and she has some work for him. She tells him that she needs a driver and a bodyguard for maybe 1-2 days at the most, and she's willing to pay a lot. She tells him that there will be no gunplay, no violence. The job is simply picking up a guy and taking him to an airport. But discretion is needed because this certain individual has a warrant out for his arrest on charges of homosexuality. If they don't save this particular guy, he's going to end up being castrated. Now, this offer sounds a lot like the kind of offer that Inspector Aziz was warning him about. So he does ask, do you know Thomas Wayne? But she has no idea who Thomas Wayne is. She then gives him an address and a time to meet up the next day, and she heads off. Later that night, when Alfred does in fact head back to the club for work, he meets up with Baza and Dave Boy, and he tells them about the new job. Dave Boy's pumped. I mean, the amount of money that they're getting for it. He can't wait to get to work, but Alfred tells him, it'll just be me. As the trio is talking about what Alfie plans on doing if he gets himself into a pickle, Esme sheepishly walks up to him and says hello, and lets him know that her play is going to a proper playhouse. So today will be her last day at the club. She really came over to say goodbye to him, and he does seem happy that her play is taking off, but it's a very awkward interaction. The next day, he goes and picks up Martha Kane, but the address that she gives him is a police station, and that's because the subject that they're to take to the airport has already been arrested. Martha's plan is to go into the police station posing as the guy's lawyer. She figures that she can fake it till she makes it, and Pennyworth is to pose as her clerk. They storm into the police station, demanding to see Martha's quote-unquote client, a guy named Ian Thurso, and it works. She's very convincing. They're about to take him out of there, though, when a police officer enters the room and starts to kind of question the fact that they're so young and they're his lawyers. But Martha, though, doesn't get deterred. She throws a bunch of words at the guy and hands him a very convincing-looking habeas corpus that's allegedly signed by the Court of Chancery. When the police officer hears Court of Chancery, he gets so spooked that he tells her, you can have him. Just take him away. But Ian doesn't want to go without his boyfriend. The police officer, though, tells him that his boyfriend, Sam, is giving a statement. And Martha's pretty quick on her feet and says, well, if he's giving a statement, then that means he hasn't been arrested. She turns to Pennyworth and says, mark this down in your notes for the next time we talk to the Chancery. So the constable, once again, says, you know what, take both of them. And Thurso's boyfriend, Sam, is in the other room. He is, quote, giving a statement, but in reality, he's just messing with the woman who's questioning him. That's when Pennyworth comes in and tells him, we're leaving. Pennyworth, Martha, Sam, Thurso all get in the car and head off to the airport to get Thurso out of town. But before they can do that, though, they have to stop off at the barn where the police caught Sam and Thurso. And that's because Thurso has a computer in the barn. And right before they were caught, the computer was able to calculate pi to the 10th decimal. Martha had mentioned earlier that Thurso had friends in high places. This is probably the reason why. He's a borderline genius. So wherever he's going, the computer has to go as well. The group then head to the airport, and in the cover of night, they wait for the plane to arrive to take Thurso away. But as they're waiting for the plane to leave, Pennyworth starts questioning Martha on everything. He didn't really care before about knowing too much, but now he feels like he knows too little. That's when Martha tells him that she works for the No Name League, and Pennyworth can't believe it. He thought at worst she worked for the CIA. And it made sense because she had access to an old U.S. Air Force base. She was able to turn the lights on. She has way too much money, Chancery documents that looked super legit, but she says no. I just work for the No Name League. If the No Name League wants me to work for the Americans, though, I work for the Americans. They then hear the plane coming, so the conversation hits a lull. But then these 3 cars show up and blast the generator. All the lights on the runway go out, the plane can't see where the runway is, so it can't land, and then someone from the Raven Society enters the hangar and says, "Why don't you come out here and we'll have a chat?" Well, moments like this is why Martha hired Alfred. They stow the computer away, and Alfred tells the group, "I'll go out there and have the chat." Before he does so, though, she tells him, the Raven Society cannot get Thurso. Problem is, they're way outgunned. I mean, it's probably like 9 guns to her 1. So Alfred has to defuse the situation and try not to get shot. Pennyworth heads out and meets with the Raven Society reps, and they tell him if he brings out Thurso and his items, they'll make sure that he's looked after, which Pennyworth chuckles at and says, "Looked after? You're going to kill him." She reassures him, though, that the machine is useless without him, so they're not going to hurt him. He tells the Raven Society that it's not up to him, though. He has to talk to his employer. But when he goes back in, he asks Martha, "What would it be worth to your employer if I was to sort this all out?" And she says, "Name your price." And when he says 10,000 quid, she quickly says, "Done." He probably could have named any amount of money, and she would have said, "Done." But this also proves what a tough situation they're currently in. So with the agreed upon price, Pennyworth, with the gun in his pocket concealed, grabs Thurso and heads out. But instead of handing Thurso over to the Raven Society, he says, "I talked to my boss. No deal." She's under strict instructions to kill him and destroy the machine instead of letting him fall into your hands. He then pulls the gun out and points it at Thurso's skull. He tells them that if they don't leave, he's going to either blow his brains out or Martha inside will destroy the machine. One of the two. But since the machine is useless without him, and they want the machine, it puts the ball completely in their court. Pennyworth then goes on to explain that the plane isn't landing, and because of that, Thurso can't leave the country. So just try again tomorrow, because as long as he's alive, there's hope. If he's dead, though, they're going to have to explain that to their boss. This logic actually works. The Raven Society packs up and leaves. But Pennyworth knows that while they might have left, they didn't go far. They're probably down the road waiting to ambush the group. Because of that, they need to land the plane. So what he does is he stabs the fuel line of a truck, and then he drives the truck down the runway, spewing gasoline all over the place. He tells Martha to wait about 10 seconds to light the gasoline, and this gives enough light on the airstrip for the plane to land. They pack up the computer into the plane, and Thurso, along with Sam, get in and take off for safety. Now that the job is done, they head back to Martha's so that Pennyworth can get paid. As she's handing the money over, she tells him, "I hope that one day we can work again." And even though Pennyworth thinks that she works for some pretty sketchy individuals, money's money. So he's definitely willing to work for her again if the money's right. And it's pretty clear the money is going to be right with these people. And that job's probably going to come sooner rather than later, because she tells him, "I'll need you next week." He then heads back to the club because, remember, he has 2 jobs. And he meets up with Dave Boy and Baza and gives them their cut. And those two have had quite a day. While waiting for the club to open, Baza was playing cards with a couple guys when Dave Boy woke up in a drunken stupor and demanded to play along. He was annoying pretty much everybody in the room, and one in particular got a little too frustrated with Dave Boy's antics and pulled a gun on him. Dave Boy figured that this guy was just bluffing, and sure enough, he was, to the point where Dave Boy was actually able to get the gun away from him. But when Dave threw the gun back at the gun went off, and the guy ended up getting shot in the head inadvertently. Baza had to call up some friends to clean up the body, but it became apparent to him that Dave Boy doesn't just have a drinking problem, he has a problem. He's going through something. But by the time that Pennyworth meets up with them, Dave Boy seems to be clean, sober, and happy. That's because all he cares about is the money. Baza, however, sees through it and says, "What's the bad news?" And Pennyworth lets him know that the money came from the no-names. Or maybe it was the CIA, or both. And Baza's not thrilled about it, but once again, money's money. They all have bills to pay. Now with his first really well-paying job, it's time to change his lifestyle. Alfred has rented a vehicle for the week, really nice vehicle, and heads back to his parents' place where his dad starts chastising him on wasting money on frivolous things like nice suits and cars, even though the car isn't that expensive. But Alfred has had enough of being under his dad's thumb. He lays into him about embarrassing Esme when she came over for dinner. He then lays into him about being disrespectful to not only him, but more importantly, his mother. The whole time, Mrs. Pennyworth is trying to defuse the situation, but it ends with Alfie leaving. And this newfound courage is because Alfie has found his own place. But it's too big for one guy. He needs somebody else in there, and that's when he goes and finds Esme. She's a little taken aback to see him, but he says, "Follow me." And he brings her to the apartment and tells her that he put down 2 years' worth of rent in order to lock it up. She's very surprised because she feels like Alfie left her. And Alfie reminds her, you gave me the ring and you left, but she tells him, yeah, but you didn't come after me. Alfie admits that he didn't come after her because he was scared. After what her father said, he wanted to deny the animal inside him, but he knows that he does in fact have an animal in there. That animal has paid the rent and kept him alive since he was 16. And what he's scared of is the idea that nobody else is in there. Somebody that deserves Esme. She then tries to get him on track and asks, all right, Alfie, but why are we here? And he says, you had the courage to pave your own way. I didn't, but I do now. And then he gives her the ring back. And then finally, over with Harwood, the Prime Minister and Aziz try one last-ditch effort to get some information out of him, but they're not able to. So the barber comes in. Right before Aziz leaves, though, Harwood starts talking tough to him about how he'll be back and the Prime Minister will pay and yada, yada, yada. But later that night, in the slums of London, a van pulls up and throws somebody out of it and drives off. And that person is Lord Harwood, who is missing not only a nose, but also a foot. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. Make sure to be nice in the comment section. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen there, I'll get it up in a few days, not to worry. And I have merchandise, so go buy a mug or something. It's never too early to think about Christmas gifts, folks. Once again, thank you for checking out this recap.